This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan blames loyalists of ousted President Omar al-Bashir for attempted coup. We are moving in the wrong direction, UN chief says as world leaders address the General Assembly. And cholera has killed over 2,000 people in Nigeria this year. This is Africa Live. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Joining me in studio with the business headlines is Uche.
Thanks, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The U.S. to exempt fully vaccinated visitors from quarantine requirements. And Egyptian companies to lead reconstruction efforts in Libya. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you.
Thank you, Uche. The 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly has just opened. Secretary General Antonio Guterres delivered a speech warning about the daunting issues the world is facing.
The world must wake up. We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction. Our world has never been more threatened or more divided. We face the greatest cascade of crises in our lifetimes. The COVID-19 pandemic has supersized the glaring inequalities. The climate crisis is pummeling the planet. Upheaval from Afghanistan to Ethiopia to Yemen and beyond has thwarted peace. A surge of mistrust and misinformation is polarizing people and paralyzing societies. Human rights are under fire, and science is under assault. And the economic lifelines for the most vulnerable are coming too little and too late, if they come at all. Solidarity is missing in action just when we need it most.
John Turrett joins us from New York now with the latest updates. John, world leaders have been addressing the UN General Assembly. What are the key highlights of those speeches?
Well, Peninah, I think the highlight of the day so far was that clip that you played from the Secretary General, and I think we're going to talk about that a bit more in a minute. But beyond that, of course, the first speech before the General Assembly of the United Nations in the debate week by the new U.S. President Joe Biden, who came here a few hours ago, has now left the UN complex. But his message, generally speaking, was America is back, which is one of his favorite themes. But that's actually a very difficult thing for an American president to get over before an international audience, particularly in the light of what happened in Afghanistan and what we've seen recently regarding America's oldest ally, France, and that AUKUS agreement, an agreement that's also rattled China very badly as well. Another headline I picked out from what the president said, he said at one point, America will lead on the world's problems, but we won't go it alone. And I think that was the tone of this address. It was very much more collegial than we've seen before. It lasted just over 33 minutes, and I think one of the jobs that President Biden had to do was to prove that he's not President Trump, which in the light of what I've just said is also quite difficult, but I think he certainly did that. I think what he had to say was rather Obama-esque, if I may put it that way. Of course, he was vice president to President Obama a number of years ago. Let's begin then. President Biden called the world out as being at an inflection point. And he was talking at the time about COVID-19 and the millions of people around the world who have died from it. And of course, tomorrow there's a UN summit, partly virtual, partly in person, which was requested by President Obama to look into the issue of COVID-19 and all its many variants. And the president called that a very exciting opportunity. On the use of force, he said that the U.S. military will, under his administration, be used as a tool of last resort when it comes to potential conflicts around the world. He called NATO sacred. And on the issue, for me, the big headline was that he made it very clear to his international audience today, at least in terms of fine words, he said that America has no intention and does not want to create a new Cold War. And he said that America is prepared to work with any nation at all, in order to avoid that. Now, the other theme of this was relentless diplomacy. I think that's another way to think about what President Biden is now espousing. And to that end, let's listen to this soundbite from what he said a few hours ago.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world.
Now, to that end, just to finish off the thought, you heard him talk there about diplomacy being key. He did talk about the DPRK, North Korea, saying that the US is determined to make sure that the peninsula is free of all nuclear weapons. Regarding Iran, he said that regarding the JCPOA and the talks going on in Vienna, to which I think many think the Biden administration was rather late coming to the party, he said that we are prepared to return to full compliance if Iran will do so as well. And so you see, it was all about human rights, it was about togetherness. He did reserve the right to defend America both in cyberspace and also from terrorist attacks. And on the continent of Africa, only one mention that I heard. There may have been others, but I only heard one. He talked about Yemen and about Ethiopia in the context of daily reports of rape being used as a weapon. And of course, only last week I was on the program reporting that America is holding in reserve sanctions against Ethiopia for just that kind of issue. Peninah?
And John, earlier the UN Secretary General said solidarity is missing and that the world is moving in the wrong direction. How are his remarks being received?
Well, you know, Peninah, I'm so pleased that you asked me about that. And I think that it's only an African journalist would ask that question. What I mean by that is that we know, don't we, that the UN here in many ways is more important to African countries than the Biden administration or any other key administration around the world. This is key. And the Secretary General always makes remarks at the opening day, and he did today, but I've been talking to people here, and many of them here with me now, who think that that was probably the most dramatic speech that we've ever heard on the opening day of a General Assembly from a Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. And listen to the opening remarks. This is what Antonio Guterres opened up with. The first thing he said, I'm here to sound the alarm. The world must wake up. We're on the edge of an abyss. And of course, he was talking about COVID-19, he was talking about climate change, which affects Africa very deeply, he was talking about human rights, he was talking about democracy, all of that kind of stuff. And he set out 6 what he called Grand Canyons that the world must cross. One is peace, another one is climate change, there's the divide between rich and poor, there's the digital divide, the gender divide, and also the generational divide. I think that's 6. Well, those were his 6 key points. And the speech kind of went on and on and on, very depressing in a way, but I suppose on the other hand, also very important that somebody as senior as the Secretary General says these things. And, you know, I think he was really quite impactful today. Now, I should just finish off by saying we are about to hear from President Xi, whose speech has been brought up from last Saturday. It was to be last Saturday, the 25th, and then they changed it to today. It is recorded, it's virtual, and the speech from President Xi it will be happening in the next few minutes. If it isn't happening already, I can't see. Peninah?
All right, John, thank you for that update. John Terrett live for us in New York. And as John said, Chinese President Xi Jinping will also address the General Assembly session. Nathan King has more.
First real session of the UNGA world leaders' speeches to the United Nations, albeit remotely, and of course coming on the same day as US President Biden's first speech to the United Nations General Assembly as president. It's also an interesting time to make the speech as well. It is the 50th anniversary of the People's Republic of China assuming its rightful place in the United Nations back in 1971, both as a permanent member and also a permanent member of the Security Council, the so-called P5, with veto power. And President Xi will probably stress that in his speech. He will also probably talk about multilateralism. As you know, it's a cornerstone of Xi Jinping thought, And essentially what he does is put the United Nations at the center of this vision of multilateralism and a shared vision for the future of mankind. But of course this comes at a time when UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned both the US and China to avoid a Cold War and cooperate on global issues facing mankind like climate change and COVID. Expect also some of that to appear in President Xi's speech as well. Nathan King, CGTN at the United Nations in New York.
Let's now head to Sudan, where authorities say they have foiled an attempted coup. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok says it was organized by elements inside and outside the military establishment. A government spokesman says leaders of the coup attempt have been arrested and are under investigation. He says authorities are pursuing remnants of the previous government allegedly involved in the coup attempt. Sudan is currently ruled under a fragile power-sharing deal between the military and civilians following the overthrow of President Omar al-Bashir in April 2019.
It's not yet known who exactly was behind the attempted coup, but the Sudanese Prime Minister said the plot was linked to the former government of the ousted leader Omar al-Bashir.
You saw the failed attempt this morning that was targeting to undermine the gains and the civilian democratic transition and block the road in front of the historical change. But people's will was stronger and apostasy is impossible.
The streets of Khartoum look normal amid reports a group of officers tried to take over state media building. According to the power sharing agreement, the military should have handed over the power to a civilian government last May, but that the transitional government should rule Sudan until elections in 2022. The cabinet has stopped the plotters and said 40 officers and civilians participated in the incident. Sudan has been battling economic hardship under the transitional government, which has been a source of strain on the authorities. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Earlier, I spoke to Tembisa Fakuda. He is a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues, and I started by asking him about the impact of the attempted coup on the ongoing transition.
Well, it's significant because Sudan remains still very unstable. We've seen over the past couple of days protests from different parts of Sudan, mainly people complaining about the lack of economic activity and the economy which continues to deteriorate. So the attempted coup, as we are told, comes amidst those kind of challenges. But there are also other opinions from very reliable sources in Sudan that the talk of the attempted coup is nothing but a smokescreen. Well, it does affect the Sudan's path to democracy, but you need to understand as well that the civilian part of the government is a very disorganized coalition. So it consists of individuals, not necessarily of political parties or organization. So if Sudan was to go on having elections, say tomorrow or 2 months from now, it stands the possibilities that the military might just win because they are the only one organized within this coalition. So it's a very big challenge for the civilians in Sudan, but also for multi-party democracy in that country.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up, no women yet as Taliban name remaining members of the new government. And cholera has killed over 2,000 people in Nigeria this year.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Taliban have announced the remaining cabinet members of Afghanistan's new government, with no women added to the all-male lineup. They also said girls would soon be allowed to return to school. Marilai Abbasin has more from Kabul.
There were several issues that Taliban acting Deputy Minister for Information was appointing to. First of all, he said, announced the rest of the cabinet, many other members, and he said now it's including other ethnics and tribes of the country, including the Hazaras, were not happy with the formation of the government because they were not seeing their own representative, and he said it's now included. And he also talked about the women political partnership in the country, and he said that you will also see that women will be participating in the governmental affairs very soon. Mainly, there were three major issues that he was appointing: the looming economic catastrophe and controlling the financial issues of the country through the government that the Taliban have already formed. And the second one is the participation of the women and their education and job and other issues relating to the women rights. And the third issue was the freezed assets of Afghanistan and the money that's frozen by the international community, more than $9 billion. And he was answering this. In regard to the main concerns of the women and girls of Afghanistan, particularly regarding to the schools, Zabila Mujahid said that it will soon be solved. They're working on the regulations and it will soon be resumed, but we are still focusing on this. The women and girls should not have any concerns in this regard. And he also said that it was not now, because the government is just formed and it's just days now, the people should wait.
Over in Nigeria, more than 2,400 people have died as a result of cholera so far this year, according to the Nigerian CDC. The country is dealing with its worst cholera outbreak in many years amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza tells us more from Abuja.
According to the Communications Department of the NCDC, the cases were reported in 25 of Nigeria's 36 states and the capital, Abuja, since January. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, describes this year's outbreak as the worst ever, which it says is affecting millions of children as well. Nigeria has experienced large cholera outbreaks in previous years, including in 1991, 2010, 2014 and 2017. Cholera is a waterborne bacterial infection that leads to vomiting, frequent stooling, dehydration, fatigue, and without proper medical attention, death. Nigeria is battling the cholera epidemic alongside the COVID-19 pandemic, which has claimed about the same number of lives so far, over 2,000. However, the head of communications of the NCDC, Yaya Disu, says health personnel and drugs have been sent to the different areas affected, while sensitization on water, sanitation and hygiene are currently ongoing. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
In Cameroon, separatist rebels have killed 15 soldiers and several civilians in 2 bomb attacks, according to government. The incidents took place in a town and village in the northwest region on September 12th and 16th, respectively. In the first attack, a military convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device. In the second attack, the village of Bamesing was hit by an IED and an anti-tank rocket launcher before coming under heavy gunfire. Cameroonian officials say the use of more sophisticated weapons marks a new phase in a secessionist conflict that has claimed over 3,000 lives. The insurgents are seeking to form a breakaway state called Ambazonia in western Cameroon. They began fighting the military in 2017 after civilian protests called for greater representation of the Anglophone minority in the largely Francophone country. Nigerian authorities have imposed a communications blackout in Sokoto State and several parts of the country's northwest region. On Monday, government said it was trying to crack down against armed kidnappers in the terrorized area. Over the past year, abductions have been on the rise in the northwestern parts of Nigeria. Armed gangs, known locally as bandits, have kidnapped more than 1,000 students from schools and taking others from hospitals, homes and roads. Zamfara State has been one of the worst hit states by the wave of mass abductions. Many of the bandits seek lucrative ransom payments. ECOWAS has given Guinea's military junta 6 months to transition the country back to democratic rule. In a coup earlier this month, an elite army unit ousted President Alpha Conde and dissolved both government and the constitution. The junta now calls itself the National Committee for Rally and Development of Guinea, or CRND. Our reporter in Conakry, Desiree Cannon, went to meet the Guinean people to get their views on the issue of transition.
How long should the transition period in Guinea last? This is the question that currently interests the Guinean people.
The transitional period indicated by ECOWAS is short to allow the different parties to negotiate. In reality, everyone knows that it is impossible to organize elections within 6 months from now. ECOWAS knows this very well. However, this proposal by ECOWAS will lead the CNRD to react and certainly make another proposal.
It is true that the junta should not stay in power forever, but I do not agree with the 6-month deadline given by ECOWAS. There are many things that need to be settled beforehand. For example, we need to have a charter of the constitution. We need to form a government.
The Guinean people also spoke out about the junta's refusal to allow President Alpha Conde to leave the country on ECOWAS orders.
According to information in our possession, President Alpha Conde would like to stay here in Guinea. We will not want to hear about exile. These are elements that we must take into account and make concrete proposals because ECOWAS cannot decide for us.
I think the junta's refusal to let Alpha Conde go into exile is wise. He should stay in his country, because to this day, Alpha Conde does not recognize his removal from office, and letting him go into exile could be a threat. He must stay here until Guinea regains stability, and then he must be left free. We will need him in any case as a former president and a resource person.
Consultations initiated by the National Committee for Rally and Development, CNRD, with political, economic and diplomatic actors, regional coordinations and other figures will end on Tuesday. Proposals resulting from this meeting could certainly provide guidance on the transition timetable. Desiree Cannon, CGTN, Conakry, Guinea.
U.S. Congresswoman Karen Bass concluded her Ethiopia visit on Monday. Talks with Ethiopian ministers focused on the situation in northern Ethiopia. Her visit comes as the Biden administration threatens sanctions against those prolonging the fighting or obstructing humanitarian access, among others. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more.
With the current tension between the United States and Ethiopia due to the proposed sanctions by Washington, the visit by Congresswoman Karen Bass to Addis Ababa is crucially important to all sides. While in Addis, Bass met Deputy Prime Minister Demeka Mekonnen, among other ministers, and discussed mainly the conflict in northern Ethiopia.
The Deputy Minister has deeply explained to the Congressman about the background of the law enforcement mission in the north. He has also given details of the government's efforts when it comes to resolving the conflict peacefully by making a unilateral ceasefire, which TPLF simply decided to ignore. Ms. Bays also knows how this rebel group abandoned the reform process way before the beginning of the war.
The U.S. has proposed to slam sanctions against individuals from the Ethiopian government and TPLF sides who are blamed for allegedly fueling the war. Washington has already put in place visa restrictions on Ethiopian officials a few months back.
Congresswoman Karen Bass promised she and her country will work to maintain the sovereignty, peace and territorial integrity of Ethiopia. She has also explained the desire from the U.S. side to further strengthen the strong ties between the two nations. The Congresswoman promised to deliver on her promises, and we believe this high level of visit was a successful one.
The conflict in Ethiopia has continued to be a center of attention for the international community. The United Nations remains worried about the humanitarian situation there as war continues. Gurum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Uganda has received over 1.6 million doses of the Pfizer vaccines from the United States government. The East African country is one of many African nations struggling to find vaccines for its population. Leon Senyange has more.
It's the largest single consignment of vaccines received by Uganda. The donation is part of the U.S. government's global efforts to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. The arrival of Pfizer vaccines is expected to supplement the ongoing vaccination exercise in the country. Early this month, Uganda received over 647,000 doses of the Moderna vaccines. Since the pandemic last year, the United States has provided approximately $110 million to Uganda in direct assistance, specifically to respond to COVID-19. Uganda has so far administered over 1.7 million doses throughout its COVID-19 vaccination campaign that started in March this year. The vaccines have majorly been administered to priority groups that include teachers, medical personnel, and forces servicemen. The country plans to vaccinate 22 million people by next year. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
More than 200 South Sudanese educated in China have formed a new South Sudan-China Alumni Association. The members of the group say they intend to apply the knowledge and skills acquired from their studies at various Chinese universities to benefit South Sudan. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
More than 200 South Sudanese students have graduated from Chinese education courses in the past 10 years. Beijing continues to award scholarships to South Sudanese students pursuing university education to study in China. Those that have now returned home have formed the South Sudan-China Alumni Association. China's ambassador to South Sudan says Beijing will continue supporting development of human capital in the country.
All alumni are active in all walks of life in South Sudan and have the responsibility of constructing your country and serving your people. I hope you will show the spirit gained from studying in China. Having learned the Chinese saying of taking the public interests into first consideration,
South Sudan's government says the formation of the South Sudan-China Alumni Association is a culmination of strong bilateral relations between the two countries.
China has contributed enormously infrastructure-wise, health-wise. The recent one, as you know, we receive a lot of PPEs to fight the COVID. You know of the major infrastructure development that's happening across the country. And also South Sudan, as a being 10-year-old country, we are not just receiving, we are also contributing to China through multilateral system.
South Sudan supplies China 30,000 barrels of crude oil per day. That oil money is used by China for infrastructural development, including building roads in the East African country, further strengthening relations between the two countries. Some of the students who benefited from the Chinese government scholarship are also involved in road construction being carried out by Chinese government in South Sudan. Others say the education they acquired is helping them train colleagues, especially in the petroleum sector.
Training us as professionals in different fields indicates that the plan for both South Sudan and China is for centuries and generations to come.
China continues to provide scholarships in several academic fields, including petroleum, legal and managerial sectors. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown off many developing countries chasing sustainable development goals set by the United Nations. This includes its SDG 8, which targets decent work and economic growth. In South Africa, the pandemic has slowed the economy and unemployment has rocketed to the highest in the world as the country was locked down. CGTN's Julie Shire takes a look at the jobless situation.
Louis Subasu was born poor. He dropped out of school and joined a life of drugs and crime, desperate to escape his circumstances.
We didn't have lunch to carry at school. I never went to school trips, so I started to hang around with bad company or with bad people, or I would say, Then because of that, and then I was involved in criminal activities.
Basu turned his life around after being arrested for attempted murder, but found it difficult to land a job.
The rejection you get, like they can't, as soon as they see your CV, they say that no, we are not. They don't even want to hear your story, and they say no, we are not hiring. So the disappointment, the rejection, like that feeling of being rejected, and the disappointments, the discouragement, because you won't be able to wake up tomorrow and go search for other jobs.
He eventually gave up the search and started his own food business.
I went to door, telling them that I have this thing, the quotation. I want to buy these equipments. I need this much. What can I do for you? I can paint your house. I can wash your windows. So that's where I started to. That's why I get the money to buy the equipments. Then 2017 I started this business.
Basu's plight is similar to that faced by millions of South Africans. COVID-19 and an outbreak of violence and looting has worsened the situation, throwing South Africa's poverty alleviation targets off track.
If you look at the two affected provinces, for an example, when it comes to looting, these are the biggest provinces, firstly, when it comes to population. At the same time, these also are the backbone of the South African economy. So the fact that they themselves have experienced this level of instability, it means that the economy as a whole is going to pay a price.
South Africa has widened its social safety net to help people get by, but it does little to curb the long-term effects.
They are really unsustainable. Of course, you bring in the issue of free education too. A good idea, it opens the doors of learning. But if you look at the economy that we have, many of these young people are then unemployed, and then they have to sit at home with no source of income.
The COVID-19 pandemic has meant a serious drain on resources with little time to focus on achieving sustainable development goals. South Africa's unemployment rate has been pushed up to the highest in the world. People here are getting poorer every day. Eradicating poverty completely in the next 9 years will be a tall order. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
All right, let's now get the latest from the business desk, and Uche joins us for that.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The U.S. to exempt fully vaccinated visitors from quarantine requirements. And Egyptian companies to lead reconstruction efforts in Libya.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, Well, let's start off with some international news. The White House says people who are not U.S. citizens but plan to travel to the U.S. must provide proof of vaccination and a negative test result taken within 3 days of departure. Now, fully vaccinated passengers will be exempt from quarantine upon arrival. The new policy will end a number of pandemic bans which were imposed by the former Trump administration on travel from 33 nations. The tourism industry has welcomed the news as it has been lobbying the federal government to make those changes. At the same time, the Centers for Disease Control plans to roll out more stringent contact tracing requirements in the coming weeks, including information on phone numbers and email addresses of U.S.-bound international travelers. And heading back to the continent now, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has officially declared his country's interest in hosting the United Nations COP27 summit, which is scheduled for 2022. Now, Egypt is offering to host the climate change conference on behalf of the African continent. Sisi said it will work to make the conference a radical turning point in international climate efforts in coordination with all parties for the benefit of Africa and the entire world. Well, this year's conference, COP26, will be hosted by the United Kingdom in Glasgow in November. Meanwhile, Egypt and Libya have inked 14 memorandum of understanding and 6 agreements in multiple fields. According to the agreement, Egyptian companies will now lead the construction process in Libya, which has been marred by violence and infighting in the last decade. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
It's a milestone in relations between the two North African neighbors that could go a long way in helping rebuild the war-stricken Libyan state. Authorities in Tripoli say the deals signed in Cairo amount to about $19 billion and will be financed by the Libyan Central Bank.
We all know that Libya has a completely damaged infrastructure, education and health systems, and others since the NATO attacks in 2011. And it is now a remnant of a state that requires rebuilding. We will need the Egyptian expertise and labor, especially now that Egypt has revolutionized its construction and infrastructure sectors and the economy in general.
The 20 agreements cover a wide range of projects, building power stations, highways, housing, infrastructure, as well as projects in oil and gas, renewable energy, aviation, agriculture, and more. All this will be conducted by Egyptian companies.
There are now many huge companies in Egypt that have experience in developing projects in all fields. They have been in the forefront of our successful developmental process and will be transferring their experience to establish projects that will achieve all the hopes and ambitions of the Libyan people soon.
Egypt would also benefit from these deals by creating investment opportunities for its companies, more jobs for Egyptian workers in Libya, and a new revenue stream. However, some experts warn it could be a bumpy road ahead.
These agreements are hinging on the security situation in Libya. The agreements remain only pen on paper. As long as Libya is not stable and secure, as long as the political process is not going on the right track to hold elections in December, to disarm militias and deport mercenaries, I fear if this is not achieved, then the agreements will not become a reality on the ground.
But the Libyan interim prime minister had a message of support to all those involved in the agreement.
We demand the ministers in both governments and the companies to work hard to actualize the MOUs and contracts signed here into a reality in the next few weeks, and we will not hesitate as Libyan people, myself personally, and the Egyptian Prime Minister in providing all necessary support to make your mission a success.
And in a sign of intent, meetings in the Egyptian capital saw the relaunch of the Joint Egyptian-Libyan Higher Committee after a 12-year suspension. It will be monitoring the progress of these projects and tackle any obstacles that stand in the way. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now, where smartphone shipments into the country grew by 37% in the second quarter of 2021. That's according to the latest report from the International Data Corporation. Now, the study shows that brands such as Tecno, Itel and Infinix continue to dominate Africa's smartphone space with about 47% unit shares during the period. Samsung and Xiaomi followed in second and third place with unit shares of 19.3% and 9.1% respectively. Here's CGTN's Deji Bademosi with more.
With an estimated over 100 million smartphone users and still counting, it's really not a surprise that the IDC data shows Nigeria tops smartphone shipments into Africa. Ziggy Ibe has been dealing in ICT products, including smartphones, in Nigeria's biggest ICT market, the Computer Village in Lagos, for several years now. He says the demand for smartphones is rapidly increasing.
Some of the smartphones demand is basically because of their video quality, because of their connectivity ability to connect to your business partners out there. Okay, so yes, the smaller phones are still in the market, but their demands are becoming too low because there's nothing much they could do as compared to the smartphones.
ICT experts say price is at the heart of the increasing demand for smartphones in Nigeria, and they attribute that to cheaper smartphones from Chinese brands, which are now the market leader in the country.
We've been able to discount the prices of the highly known brands, and I don't want to mention their names, by a factor of 45% in terms of pricing. And this has made it accessible to those that are previously feature-owned phone users to the smartphone users. And since it's their first time of using the smartphones, they obviously are very price conscious. And because the Chinese type phones and devices have been able to address the affordability, there's been a noticed ramp up in the number of smart devices that are in country.
One Chinese brand that has quickly established itself as the dominant player in Nigeria's smartphone market is Transsion, with its popular brands Tecno and Infinix. Ibe says the demand for the brands is indeed high.
Tecno and Infinix are taking the lead because they are affordable, okay? And they can equally give you what you can do with the little amount you use in getting them. It's evidential, you know, in all the places you go.
With Nigeria set to roll out the 5G network, ICT experts are forecasting increased broadband penetration and smartphone usage in the country.
It means that we have to spend more on Forex, which is not such a good thing for Nigeria. Obviously, if we are able to support and promote local brands, and I'm referring to Tecno, for instance, and AfriOne, then there'll be less dependence or requirements for Forex to be used to import these phones. So what we need to do is really establish locally assembled or locally manufactured devices in Nigeria. We have a very large population and it's going to continue to grow.
As smartphone sales continue to rise, demand for feature phones, which used to dominate the market here, is dropping. The IDC data shows feature phone shipment into the country dropped by 6.4% in the second quarter of 2021. So it might just be a matter of time before smartphones completely take over the market here. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And in Uganda, a group of digital marketers are now helping smallholder farmers in the country to sell their fresh produce using online markets. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates farms in sub-Saharan Africa fail to sell up to 50% of fresh produce, leading to food wastage. Well, CGTN's Isabel Nakiria has more on that.
Tons of Irish potatoes ready for delivery in Kampala's markets and hotels. This warehouse outside the capital, Kampala, buys Irish potatoes from rural farmers and sells with the help of online markets.
We have different online markets. We have Jumia, we have Walimi, we have Safe Border, and then we have personal distributors.
And to ensure good standards, The Ukumbi warehouse supplies quality seeds to the rural farmers to maintain good yields.
Most of our market here, they don't want a small size, since most of them use for chips. So you find when you have a small size, we have to again take it back to Fort Portal and use it maybe for seedling.
With support from online markets like Walimi Katali, this farmer store has managed to sell out all its fresh potatoes much easier and faster. The digital team says they are trying to scale up markets for farmers using technology.
We have a lot of farming going on the continent, but then when you look at farming, agriculture and technology, there's been a gap. Agriculture has been left behind for a long time, and yet if you just came in and just used technology to transform agriculture, there's a lot of mileage you could attain.
Many rural farmers lack cold storage for their fresh produce, and a lot of it goes to waste if it can't be sold quickly. Many more farmers have already signed in on this online market and are selling a wide range of fresh produce. This kind of technology is not only helping farmers avoid farm losses, but also improving their incomes. The Food and Agriculture Organization says it's trained 80 farmer groups in Uganda in good farming practices and improved technologies. The UN hopes farmers can put these skills to good use to enable them to have bigger yields and also avoid wastage. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, South Africa's first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, continues to be remembered by people across the world. The iconic statesman died 6 years ago, but his legacy as a freedom fighter and a humanitarian still lives on. Well, the Nelson Mandela Foundation is now giving those that revered him another opportunity to experience a part of his life. Here's Sumitra Naidu telling us more.
Sanctuary Mandela is for anyone wanting a glimpse into Madiba's life after 27 years in prison. His first home in Soweto was turned into a museum. His second home here in Houghton, Johannesburg, was where Mandela spent his last years.
He lived here when he left Soweto after he was released. He also lived here, part of his presidency, and even post his presidency, just before he moved into the other house on 12th Avenue with Mama Gracia Machel.
The Nelson Mandela Foundation collaborated with the Motsamai Tourism Group to transform the home into a boutique hotel.
We wanted to create something not quite a museum, but something that also embodies the spirit of the person of Nelson Mandela and bring it to life. And that's really how we thought we should do a place of reflection, which is what we call this facility. But it's really accommodation, 9 bedrooms, very luxuriously done. It also has a conferencing facility, and we've got a lovely restaurant called Insights, where we also have Sis Xoli, who used to be President Mandela's chef, working together with the kitchen team to really infuse a complete Mandela experience into the food even.
This hotel is simple yet elegant. It has been beautifully decorated with modern touches, but it does give you a feeling like you're going back in time into the history of Nelson Mandela.
We've curated a whole story. It's a journey through Madiba's life. We want you, when you come through, to live in every single room and have a different story or a different take from your stay. It's an experience, so anyone who comes in must leave here with a head full of knowledge.
The walls adorn art to capture the essence of who Madiba was and the various periods of his life.
We kept the facade exactly the same because it is a heritage site. And so we kept the main face of the whole building exactly the same. The window paneling is still the original window paneling. We just had it refurbished. And then we've got 3 original rooms from the house as well. Everything else has been built on.
Every detail of this boutique hotel is designed to deliver history and mindful experiences. The staff go out of their way to make you feel like you're a guest of Madiba himself. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Houghton, South Africa.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, the Uganda Securities Exchange has partnered with a mobile telecom firm, MTN Uganda, to form a mobile digital trading platform. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Plenty more coming up in sports, including this. We tell you the story of women football development in the East and Central African region.